Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about some different memory problems that can occur due to brain damage. And I'm also going to talk about, how is it that our memory fails us and, what kind of things can happen that interfere with our ability to remember things accurately. I'm going to talk about eyewitness misidentification, false memory creation, and also talk about the 7 sins of memory that they talk about in the book. So what are the things that cause us not to remember things? But first of all, we're going to talk about some brain injuries and how that can actually affect our memory. So there's something called anterograde amnesia, and this is caused by damage to the hippocampus. So usually by a head injury, sometimes like a car accident. If you've ever seen the movie 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore, it's pretty old right now, but she actually had a car accident where she had a head injury and she was perfectly fine except for she had damage to her hippocampus and she could not create any new memories. So every morning she woke up, she thought it was the same day. Her family was trying to pretend like it was the same day, and Adam Sandler was trying to date her, and yet every time she met him, she didn't remember him. So the person, when they have anterograde amnesia, they can't create new long-term memories, and it's due to damage to the hippocampus. They always live in the present, and they're aware, and oftentimes they have been told enough times that they know that they don't have short-term memory. But if you could imagine what it might be living like day to day, you wake up every morning and you look in the mirror and you're 10 years older than you remember you're being, and you don't remember from moment to moment things that happen. They sort of made light of it in the movie 50 First Dates, but it's really not a light disorder, and it is a disorder that many people actually have due to head injuries. So your memories prior to the damage will remain intact, but any new memories you cannot create. And so a lot of people try to cope by writing notes and, writing notes and things like that to themselves, but there's just no memory of it. So it's really kind of crazy. The movie Memento is an older movie as well, but it's actually a really good representation of what it might truly be like to have short-term memory loss. He has a head injury. He witnesses his wife getting murdered and is injured in the process, and he's looking for her, murder her the whole movie, but he can't remember things moment to moment. He's got all these tattoos all over his body with notes to himself to try to remember what he's doing and who he is, and it's a pretty crazy movie. I'd highly recommend it. But that's anterograde amnesia. You can't make new memories. Retrograde amnesia is where you can't remember past memories. So, if you remember retrograde, retro we know means past, then we know that anterograde is the opposite. So retrograde means that your long-term memories prior to the brain injury are lost. And it can be temporary after a brain injury or a concussion or a car accident. It doesn't have to be permanent. Same with the anterograde amnesia as well. And it's also caused by damage to the hippocampus. I have a really interesting podcast where the guy is talking about this Fernando Alonso, who is a Spanish Formula One racer, and he gets in this horrific crash that you can see here. And this probably happened 5-10 years ago or so. And he was 33 years old, and he wakes up in his hospital bed, and the doctor says, how are you? And he says, hi, I'm Fernando, and I race go-karts, and I'm 13 years old. So he lost 20 years of his life. He woke up and he thought he was 13 years old. Pretty crazy. And after about 2 weeks or so, he did the swelling in his brain went down, and he was able to regain his ability to remember his past. Luckily, I have another video of a ex-NFL football player that fell and hit his head. It erased his entire long-term memory of his whole life. It's pretty sad. So I will definitely put that video on there. I'm not sure about the podcast. I'll see if I can put it on there. So it's really interesting how fragile our memory is and how it could just get erased. So with the NFL player, his memory never came back. With Fernando, he's still racing. I thought I saw something about him recently. And he's perfectly fine now, luckily. But just having his brain shook up as much as he did in this crash caused him to lose his long-term memories. Pretty crazy. So some of the other stuff that happens with our memory or makes our memory really fallible is that we sort of reconstruct our memories. So we like to think of our childhood memories as pretty accurate and that we know what happened and we actually remember what happened. But truth be told, we don't remember much. I think I've talked about this before age 3. And our memories after that are often sort of a blend of information we got from family members and other people and our own memories. So we sort of update our long-term memories on the basis of new information, of logic, of guessing what might have could have happened. So our memory is really prone to interference and suggestibility. So you would think your long-term memory is just totally faithfully recorded and, you know, it's not. It gets updated all the time. So it's not a permanent long-term memory. None of our memories are. So our memories can be distorted and changed. And truth be told, many of our memories, there's truth to them, but there's also some falsehoods to them that we're not even aware of. And one of the other things that we have learned is that we can actually create false memories in people. I'm going to post a video of creating false memories, and there's a psychologist in England who did a research study where she showed pictures of people in their childhood and showed them in a hot air balloon ride, and it convinced these people that they had been on a hot air balloon ride as a kid, even though they had never been on a hot air balloon ride. They had just cut and pasted their pictures from their childhood into this balloon to make it look like they had actually ridden in a balloon, but they had never been in a hot air balloon. So people so even though they didn't remember that memory in the very beginning of riding in a hot air balloon, after talking about it for a week or so with the researchers, they believed that they had been on a hot air balloon ride. So people fill in like gaps of different childhood memories from family stories, and pretty soon it gets all blended together and it's not really clear what's a real memory and what is just a blend of memory. So we do know that false memories can be implanted and that our memories are quite fragile and we have to be really careful. Your homework assignment is going to be about eyewitness misidentification, and there have been a lot of problems with eyewitness testimony and interviewing of witnesses of crimes because oftentimes inadvertently interviewers, detectives, police officers, when they're interviewing people with about a crime that they witnessed, they might accidentally give them hints about the crime. They might accidentally say, yep, you picked the right perpetrator. They might ask them a question that's kind of leading that makes them think that, okay, that's what happened when it really didn't happen. So today we are really careful about not implanting memories in people and making sure that the memories that people are having are really true memories. And one of the biggest problems with eyewitness misidentification is that we've discovered there are many people in prison, falsely in prison, that were positively identified by a witness. Even the witnesses feel terrible. So the video I'm going to have you watch is a 60 minutes video about Ronald Cotton, which is the guy here on the right. He spent 11 years in prison for a crime that he didn't commit, and it was a rape, and the woman who identified him was 100% convinced that he was the right guy, and it turns out it was this guy here. And it's interesting because they ended up in jail, in the same jail together, and they had grown up in the same neighborhood, they lived in the same area, but poor Ronald Cotton was just walking by the area when Ronald Poole was committing the crime, and Ronald Cotton got charged and put in jail for the crime. And the problem was that when the police showed a lineup of Ronald Cotton with other people in that particular lineup, Ronald Poole was not in the lineup. The guy that actually did it was not in the lineup. And as an eyewitness, you think, I want to identify the person who committed this crime, right? And so you're looking for somebody that looks the most like that person that you did, which is kind of a problem if you're the person that looks the most like that person, but you're not that person. And then, so that's one of the problems with eyewitness misidentification. I'm going to put some short videos in of demonstration that they've done in classrooms that are kind of fun about students witnessing a crime and identifying the perpetrator. And it's pretty amazing. You think you know, and you really don't know. So, we'll have you watch those videos and see what you think. And it's kind of fun to do it in that aspect. But when we're talking about people's lives and spending years in prison for something that they didn't do. Oh, so the other thing was with the lineup. So Jennifer, I don't remember her last name now, but Jennifer was the name of the woman that identified Ronald Cotton as the guy that had raped her. When I picked his picture out of the lineup, the police officers said, yep, that's the guy. So in her mind, now the picture of Ronald Poole that she saw in the lineup is now the picture of the guy that actually raped her, and it wasn't. It was just a similar looking guy. It was not him. And so DNA evidence, luckily, exonerated him. But there are many people in prison that have been put in prison based on eyewitness testimony that could be innocent. And not everybody has the ability they don't have the evidence still to test the DNA. In Ronald Cotton's case, they were able to test the evidence and find out that it was not him, it was Ronald Poole that committed that crime. So there is something called the Innocence Project that's been going on now for 25 years. DNA was discovered in 1996, so that is about 25 years ago now. And with the advent of DNA, we are able to go back in many of these cases and find that people really truly were wrongfully convicted, that their DNA does not match the crime scene. Prior to that, we didn't have as much ability to, we didn't have as much evidence and much information to go on to convict people, and we based a lot of convictions on eyewitness testimony. So in all of these cases where people have been exonerated by the Innocence Project, in about 75% of them, it's because the eyewitness misidentified that person, and DNA evidence proved that they were innocent. So it's really interesting thing to think about. We used to believe that our memories were really reliable and that eyewitnesses could give us good information. And sometimes eyewitnesses can give us good information about a crime, a car, and it's certainly worth remembering things if you do witness a crime. But also, we can't use that as the only information to convict somebody because our memories are just not that great, our abilities to do that. So we can inadvertently have leading questions implanted. So with lots of knowledge, the knowledge that we have now about memory and the suggestibility of memory, investigators really follow strict guidelines now to prevent this today. And now we do have DNA evidence, and people expect to see DNA evidence when they are involved in a trial and trying to determine if somebody's guilty, because that really gives us accurate information. We know that eyewitness testimony cannot be as accurate, unfortunately. Loftus and Palmer were two psychologists that are still around, still doing a lot of study on memory, and they were the first to kind of come out and really question how fallible our memory is. And it was really revolutionary at the time because we all really like to trust our memory, right? We like to think we remember things accurately, and we don't like to think that we don't remember things accurately. But unfortunately, misleading information can actually distort our memory. So Loftus and Palmer did this experiment where they asked kind of a leading question. So first of all, they asked participants how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. And they all saw the same video or the same picture, and the other group was asked is how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. They all saw the same video, saw the same picture, and the ones that said when they were asked how fast were they going when they hit each other, 15 miles an hour. When they smashed into each other, 50 miles an hour, right? So there was a huge difference just based on how the question was asked. So you're kind of giving them leading information by saying they smashed into each other, crashed into each other, however you want to say it. The more dramatic you are, the faster obviously the cars were going. And yet these are people that maybe witnessed the crime, watched a video of the cars crashing, and yet they came up with the wrong information. So we can definitely distort people's memory just by the way we ask the question, and we have to be really careful about that. So I want to give you a couple seconds to look at these pennies here and tell me which one of these is the right penny. And it's actually really tough, right? It's not an easy thing. They all look pretty good. I mean, there's some that kind of like, no, it's definitely not it, but most of them are like, I don't know. So this is the right penny right here. And what this is an encoding failure. We just did never pay attention to all the details of the penny. It wasn't necessary for us to look at all these tiny details of the penny. We knew In God We Trust was there. We probably knew Liberty was there, and the year was there, and we knew Lincoln was on there. We didn't pay attention to which way he was facing or where all those things were. So that's an encoding failure, when the memory was just never formed in the first place. We never paid attention to that detail. It wasn't important to us. We know what a penny looks like, know what a Canadian penny looks like, and we could tell pretty quickly that they're different. And so we didn't have to do that. And so sometimes when we're talking about tests and stuff, you can have an encoding failure where you didn't study enough for the test, or you didn't study the right information for the test. You didn't think the teacher was going to ask you that question, and then you get stuck without that information. So that can be a problem too if you don't encode the information that you need. There's also things that can interfere with our memory. So proactive interference is when new information interferes with your old memory. So you have to change your password on your computer, right? And so that actually, the new password might interfere with your old memory of your old password. And then you could also have retroactive interference where your old password makes it difficult to remember that new password. Proactive interference, one of the reasons why I don't ever have you start a new chapter while you're still studying for that old chapter is that new information from the new chapter can interfere with your ability to remember the stuff for the old chapter. So you should always take the chapter quiz before you start on the new chapter, the previous chapter's quiz before you start on the new chapter, because otherwise you'll get yourself confused. It can be really confusing. So retroactive interference is past interference, right? So it's your old memory interferes with your new memory. So if you rented a car, your memory of driving your own car is going to interfere with the memory, or the lack of memory that you have driving that new car. So you're going to be reaching for where everything is in your car when you're driving this rental car, and it's not always there, right? The radio is in a different spot. Different things can definitely interfere with your new memory, and your old memory can just not even memory, but just your ability to drive that new car. Your old memory is going to kick in, and think about that's your procedural memory about how to drive your car. It's pretty embedded, and so you don't even think about it, and you're reaching where everything is in your car. So the book talks about these 7 sins of memory, which are very similar to kind of what we talked about. So a failure in encoding is kind of absent-mindedness. You're not really paying attention to all the little details, so you don't even have that information stored. So just, you're not paying attention, so you forget the information. Sometimes blocking happens and we have to prime our memory to get that memory out. Sometimes our memory gets distorted. And then, our memory is really suggestible. And we also, sort of ignore things that don't agree with us, and pay attention to things that really do agree with us. And sometimes we have terrible memories that we don't want to remember, especially with post-traumatic stress disorder. And we can't forget those memories, and those memories can be really intrusive and keep coming back. There is a video that I'll include on here about these 7 sins of memory as well. So there's several really interesting videos on this chapter that I hope you'll watch. And then the last lecture is going to be on memory skills that you might be able to use for your classes.